Step into a British classroom of the 1960s or 1970s, and you'd hear the same names called out over and over during morning register. There was always a Mary, a David, a Margaret, or a John, names so familiar they felt as much a part of the walls and blackboards as the desks themselves. You'll remember these instantly, yet today they've all but vanished from playgrounds and office rosters. It's a quiet shift. You might not even have noticed a subtle change in the soundtrack of everyday life. How did names that once defined a generation disappear so completely? That's the story we're about to uncover, one name at a time. In mid-20th century Britain, a name wasn't just a label. It was a thread connecting you to your family, your street, and your community. Parents often reached for names that had been passed down through generations, names that carried the weight of grandparents, aunts, uncles, and family stories. You'd see them proudly announced in the local paper when a new baby arrived, or stitched carefully onto school jumpers so that each child could carry their identity with them through the classroom. Royalty, church traditions, and familiar neighbors all played a part in shaping these choices. A David, a Margaret, a Peter. They weren't trendy, they were reliable, familiar, and safe. Back then, names connected you to where you came from, gave you a place in a larger tapestry of community, and subtly reflected shared values. Today, naming has shifted. We often choose for individuality, for uniqueness, or for global appeal. The names that once echoed through entire streets now feel almost like a secret from the past, waiting to be rediscovered. And that quiet collective familiarity sets the stage for just how striking it is to see them disappear. Walk into any school hall or playground in Britain during the 1950s, 60s, or 70s, and you'd quickly notice a pattern. Certain names seemed to repeat endlessly, as if the whole country had agreed on a short list. Boys called John, David, Peter, or Michael. Girls named Mary, Susan, Margaret, or Patricia. Most people don't realize just how dominant these names once were. They weren't flashy or unusual, they were safe, respectable. Names that parents felt carried gravitas and reliability. You'd hear them in the morning register, at the corner shop, in letters from friends, and at family gatherings. They felt familiar, grounding, almost like an invisible thread connecting communities across towns and counties. Hearing one of these names today instantly evokes a very particular time and place, a memory of playground games, school assemblies, or a neighbor waving from their doorstep. They were more than labels. They were reassuring markers in everyday life, carrying a sense of order and continuity in post-war Britain. And yet, the sheer ubiquity of these names also meant that they gradually became part of the national backdrop. So ordinary that few of us realized just how powerful they were in shaping the everyday soundscape of the nation. Their dominance tells us a lot about the values and rhythms of a society that, in many ways, felt comfortably predictable. By the late 1960s and into the 1970s, something curious was happening across Britain. The names that had once dominated classrooms and church registers began to fade, replaced by choices that felt fresher, more individual. Television and pop culture had arrived in every living room, bringing with them a new set of influences. Children were no longer only named after grandparents or local neighbors. Parents looked to the stars, to characters on screen, to the wider world for inspiration. There was a growing desire to stand out, to give a child a name that felt distinctive rather than comfortably familiar. It wasn't a sudden rebellion against tradition, but a quiet cultural turning point, a shift in the way Britain thought about identity and expression. Names like Kevin, Tracy, Darren, or Nicola began to appear more often, while the old favorites receded, almost imperceptibly, from daily life. This slow evolution mirrored wider social changes, a society becoming more mobile, more media-savvy, and increasingly aware of individuality as a virtue. The names we once heard everywhere were quietly making room for something new, leaving a landscape of childhood registers and family trees subtly transformed. And as these new choices took hold, the old names started to feel not just less common, but like echoes of a Britain that was slowly moving forward. Even though many of those familiar names have nearly disappeared from playgrounds and office registers, they linger vividly in our memories. We can still hear a grandmother calling across the garden for a John or a Margaret, the sound carrying warmth and familiarity. We remember the neat handwriting of names on Christmas cards, or the way a teacher's voice would roll through the register, marking us present, grounding us in a shared world. Neighbors we grew up alongside, friends from childhood clubs, distant cousins, their names are etched into the rhythm of our past. These names weren't just convenient labels. They were part of the soundtrack of everyday life, small markers of belonging and continuity. They connect us to kitchens full of chatter, streets full of children, and quiet moments of family closeness. These names haven't vanished, they've simply stopped being spoken aloud, leaving behind memories that carry the warmth of another Britain, still alive in our minds. Just as Mary, David, and John once filled every classroom and street. Today's popular names, whether Olivia, Noah, or Amelia, might one day feel equally of their time. Names are little time capsules, quietly recording who we were, what we valued, and the rhythms of everyday life. They reflect the hopes of parents, the influence of culture, and the character of a generation. One day, someone will look back at today's names with the same sense of wonder we feel for the ones that have faded. And while the sounds may change, the stories and memories they carry will remain, reminding us that Britain's identity is always evolving, yet deeply rooted in the names we speak aloud and those we remember silently.